Which of the great saints and heroes of Christian history do you think was the greatest? It's a funny question to be asked. Of course, we need to start immediately remembering Mark 10, where Jesus' disciples asked him about sitting on his right hand and on his left hand in his glory, and how Jesus taught that the first will be last and the last will be first, that the Son of Man came not to be served but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So our question sounds a little wrong-headed to start with. But then again, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus did say that whoever relaxes the least of the commandments will be called least in the kingdom of heaven, and whoever teaches the commandments will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. And we are taught in Hebrews to remember our leaders and observe the outcome of their lives, though these were the leaders of the congregation or the evangelists who led us to Christ, not necessarily the great heroes of history. So, who are the great ones of church history? Well, there have indeed been great ones, and learning our history is an important thing to do. We do need to know of Athanasius and his great stand for the Trinity against the world, and Augustine and his great writings, of Luther and Zwingli and Calvin and the way in which God used them and blessed them in the 16th century to change the course of European history, and of Cranmer if you're one of the Anglicans like me, or the 18th century revival that spread across the world, Whitefield and Wesley, or the great social changes that flowed from that through men like Wilberforce or Newton. And the 20th century wasn't short of great ones either. Great preachers like John Stott and Billy Graham. But in the end, the greatest may not even be known by us, may not even be known by name. Do you remember the story of the preacher? George Gittos tells it. He took this photograph but drew this painting, very famous painting. It came from the massacre in Rwanda. And he wrote, while the massacre was going on, people were rushing in herds this way and that way, trying to get away from the killers. But I suddenly came to see an area where everything was still and calm. And there was this preacher sitting on a bag of wheat, and he created this sense of calm just by reading the Bible. He was reading in French, the Sermon on the Mount. It was incredible, the sense of peace and beauty in that group. You could see people holding their hands in prayer. Now, whether you believe in the Spirit or not, what he did was give the people their dignity back. That man disappeared from the face of this earth. We don't know if he lived or died. The artist never met him, never found out his name. He's unknown to us, although his picture is a very famous portrait that is on the front of books and around the world it's been seen. But we don't know who he was, where he came from. We just saw him for a brief moment. A man saw him, an artist saw him for a brief moment. God sees us, little people, people that no one will ever write in the history books, but people who love the Lord Jesus Christ and serve him faithfully. And I suspect it's one of them that'll turn out to be the greatest.